Well, hello there. Welcome to the Parenting Show. I'm Jennifer Anderson. With me, family counselor, parenting expert, and my co-host and friend, Alyson Schafer. We're talking about anger and aggression in the family today. A little bit of a heavy topic that we have here,
but common.
But I think it's something that a lot of people face.
And I would say that parents are particularly nervous when they start to see aggressive behavior in their kids, and they more so even when they see it in their boys. And we're living in the backdrop of the hashtag Me Too movement. It's now toxic male identity. All those things have made parents really quite worrisome when they see aggression. And of course, then we feel terribly guilty when we lose our cool. It's a good topic.
And really, we are talking about in the family because it is just that. It could be somebody who's 2 and having, a meltdown and anger issues, a teenager. It could be a parent who's dealing with how they deal with the kids or how they deal with their spouse or whatever the case may be.
And chances are, if there is one person who has a persistent anger issue, there's probably somewhere where they learned it.
Right. So where do we start with this? Maybe let's start with a young child and dealing with anger issues. I know we've reached out to social media. We do have some questions, but maybe we can just start with the idea of identifying anger versus frustration. Because as a 2-year-old or as somebody who's trying to do something and can't and getting frustrated, that's very different, I believe, than the signs of honest anger and emotion.
Well, so I would say if you want a really great education around emotions, the movie Inside Out, did you see it?
Yes.
I went to it a little bit skeptical because I'm thinking I got all my training. How are they this is pretty complicated. They nailed it. I mean, and you can watch that movie multiple times because they're actually so accurate that to get the complexity of everything that's covered off in that movie. But you'll notice that anger is one of the core emotions. Remember the little guy? And at the end of the day, he actually saves them because it's his anger that drills the hole in the glass that ends up saving them. So anger is a biological imperative. We are all wired to have that basic emotion. It plays a role in a purpose. So I want us to appreciate that there are all the different emotions of the rainbow, that we all are able to express all the different and feel all the different emotions. But it's what we do with them that is important. So when little kids are born, coming to the 2-year-old, because they have the least amount of skills, they have the least amount of coping mechanisms, the least amount of power in the family, the least amount of emotional regulation abilities, you're more likely to see them try to do something, stack some blocks or whatever it might be, cut their French toast, and they have difficulty, so they get frustrated. They're thwarted at getting what they want done. And the anger part is really what we call the fighting emotion. It's actually what we call a response to a situation.
Yes.
So what we see some situation where we think it's not just, it's unfair, I've been one downed, and I find it distasteful. And it's in that distastefulness that I decide that I should turn on my anger response, because it's like the fighting emotion. It literally will create adrenaline. You will stop digesting food. You'll send blood to your muscles. And what you're trying to do is to right the wrongs. So if you see a little child who is then frustrated, who thinks, I hate that I can't get this done, I want to do this better, they will get angry, and you'll see the tantrum that comes from that. And it's just really they're protesting their distaste of not being able to stack their blocks or cutting their French toast,
But at what point does it become not a natural thing? So, having this outburst or being angry is very natural, but at one point is it maybe a red flag for parents?
Right. So the idea that we all have sadness and sadness, right? But when is it sadness and when is it full on depression? When is it interfering?
Yes.
When is it being, overused? So we choose our emotions. Our emotions are in line with the goals that we're trying to accomplish. And so the worry about expressing anger in a way that hurts other people, that gets in the way of our ability to socialize and integrate with people, that's when it becomes problematic. And also when it becomes the only method that we know of getting our way. So that's where I get concerned about if you have somebody that's very angry in the family and they use that anger and aggression in order to dominate and get their way, gain control over people or gain control over the situation in the family, then a child usually is watching that and they will start, they imitate and they model what they see. And so now you've got a kid who's maybe got a parent who is aggressive and yells at them and is angry at them. And then either they'll get angry back at their parent and retaliate, or they'll go to school and they'll find somebody who's in a lower power position. And those are the kids that we'll see using aggression and bullying on their peers or on their siblings or on a family pet, where they can find somebody to be the recipient of their wrath.
Right.
And so in essence, what we're doing is we're not teaching kids what would be an appropriate way to deal with these feelings, what would be an appropriate way to get your way, what would be an appropriate way to handle blocks that don't stack or French toast that doesn't cut. And we have to educate them on what would be more pro-social constructive ways. And yes, it's okay to be angry, but no, you don't hit your sister. And yes, it's okay to be angry, but you don't call me names, you know?
Okay, let's go to a question.
Yeah.
Our 7-year-old becomes very angry very fast. His triggers are his siblings, an adult raising their voice, or a sense of unjust. What we are struggling with is his language. He has a 13-year-old brother who's been testing swear words for a few years, so he's heard the language. Our youngest is quick to hurl every swear word that he has ever heard. While he has not done it in public or at school, it is becoming too common at home or with close family.
So we say words are weapons. Words are weapons, just the same way as throwing an object across the room.
Right.
And usually, if we look at what's the goal of the child, it's usually to hurt. I'm going to hurt you with my words. I'm going to call you names. Now, it can be that kids swear in way of showing their parents one other way of saying, "What are you going to do? You can't stop me." Right? You can't stop the words from coming out of my mouth. Just the same way when we did the potty training show, ha ha ha, you can't make me,
yes,
empty my bowels. So kids like finding places where they stymie their parents and the parents completely flummoxed on how to stop the behavior. But we all know that swearing carries this social weight to it. We know what society says behind those words. So to use them with emotionality, they're like little daggers. I'm calling you names. I'm saying bad things. I'm swearing so that you know how upset I am. And so there's usually some revengefulness there. So we have to, rather than saying, why, how are we going to get this kid to stop swearing? Well, I would say, why don't we look at how to get this kid to stop hurting? So it's sort of the same if you think about like touching a dog and the dog nips at you and then you pull back the gums and you see that there's an abscessed tooth. Well, of course the dog is nipping at you. It's a protective mechanism. So a kid that is hurting, a kid that feels that they're being treated unfairly is going to respond with anger. We can say, don't be angry, but is that really, in a sense, fair? I don't know if I told, there used to be this word called drapetomania. And it was back in the 1800s, this was a word that was in the medical dictionary that you could be diagnosed with having drapetomania. And people with drapetomania were black slaves who ran away from their white slave owners, because you must be mentally ill to want to run away. Or maybe that was actually an appropriate response to oppression and abuse.
Yes.
Right? So often when we just see it through the lens of the parent, where we're saying like, I don't understand why this kid's so angry. And it's like, well, a lot of things that we do to kids actually are we don't recognize it as unjust. But for example, just being inconsistent. Being inconsistent can feel really unjust to kids. So how come I can't have a Timbit today, but yesterday I could? That feels unjust. In the mind of the parent, we're just saying, no, it's unreasonable. You just had something else. But if a kid can't figure the dotted line and the logic, that might be something where like, I'm mistreated, therefore I'm angry. And in this particular case of the question, he's saying that it comes up around the siblings.
Well, that's what I was going to say. His trigger is the siblings.
And so my guess is that there's probably a misunderstanding, because they need to watch the sibling episode of the parenting show,
Yes.
a lot of parents don't recognize that when kids fight and get into kerfuffles with each other, they both co-create the problem. So I'm guessing that the siblings poke him to get him triggered because he's the guy that's got the anger issue. So they probably inadvertently get him riled up and poke the bear until the bear explodes. And then mom or dad or one of the caregivers comes down hard on him. And he is recognizing how unjust that is because my siblings are the ones that were involved and only I get punished for this or only I get recognized as being the problem. And I'm sure that must feel terribly, terribly unfair because the parents aren't recognizing that the other siblings are duplicitous. So my general rule is takes two to do the crime, two do the time. What happens to one happens to the other. So I think if the parents could start recognizing that this is unjust and that start putting both kids in the same boat, that anger is going to come down in that child.
Yes. And so in the case of the swearing, you had mentioned that you can't control what somebody's doing, but you can control how you are affected by it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to listen to it. That would be the same of putting both siblings in the boat because
Right.
the older, she does say the older brother is also testing the waters with swearing. So just as a general rule, not accepting that behavior or not being in the room, I don't want to listen to that.
Yeah, I would say I would have two reactions to that. One would be I will not stand in the face of disrespect, and I would walk away. But I would also say you must be pretty angry to want to call me those names. This goes to saying we have to say their feelings are valid. So if you're that angry that you want to call me those names, I need to understand how I have hurt you, wronged you, or why. And again, it's the child's perception. You have to listen to what their perceived wrong is. And you don't necessarily have to agree with it, or at least gets you a chance to clarify. So if they say to you, like, you know, you never side with me, you always favor my brother, I want to come back not with, that's not true. Just yesterday I yelled at him for something, or that's not true. I took you to the movies on the weekend. I don't want to say that's not true. I want to say, wow, so in this family, you feel like your brother is preferred and that you always get the fuzzy end of the lollipop. Well, that would be hurtful. That would feel terrible. But that's not my intention, so we got to make that better. Right? So listening to their pain and saying, you're wrong. It's not really the point of it. We want active listening. I want to understand their point of view. I want them to feel felt. I want to understand their pain. And that's what counselors are trained to do.
Right. Another question about kids and anger. My kids seem to be much happier when they don't use electronics. As soon as they get their iPad privileges back, they have the biggest meltdown when it's time to get off and they just rage. Is there any evidence that these games and devices lead to aggression? Couple questions going on in this one.
But you know, my takeaway from that last sentence is, please tell me that there's research that says it causes aggression so that I never have to give them these things. I hate them.
Yes.
And there's just people who hate technology. They're just technophobes or whatever. They really want to give them a bad name. And I hate to say that if we look at where the research is right now, the research that is basically saying it is not the games alone. That's not to say that when you're on games and then we see behavior later, or we see aggressive behavior, is there a correlation to people that play Grand Theft Auto or whatever? But it's not causative, and there's usually other factors involved. So you have to have a predisposition, you have to have it modeled to you, there's other things. That's one of a multitude of variables that come together to create that perfect storm. But it certainly does that game cause it? No. That we have not been able to prove yet. I would say a lot of the aggression about coming off is just when you really, really love something, you're just really, really sad when it's taken away, and that sadness can turn into aggression towards somebody. They want to retaliate. And often parents get the wrath of kids because they know that you're a safe subject matter that is going to take it. You know, so
yes.
It might be that they're upset with something that happened at school, but they'll come home and you're the one who they lash out at because you love them and you're not going to stop loving them. So sometimes parents kind of get the fuzzy end that way for sure. But I would say make sure that your rules around when you get off and how you get off are well established. And many parents have these hard stops. So if they say you can play iPad till 7:30 comes and they yank the screen away, Well, imagine that you've been playing Donkey Kong, because that's where
We're going there, are we?
that's
We're heading.
Ms. Pac-Man. I could play Ms. Pac-Man tabletop game for hours. Okay, I'm not quite that bad. I like Super Mario Kart. I like Super Mario Kart too.
It was actually on your kitchen table, in the table.
Yeah, and Pong. So, no, I've upgraded my games, but just imagine that you've gotten to the last level, and you're about to complete a level, because you'll go right back to the beginning. Sometimes these kids have worked for a really long time, or it's like a cliffhanger or something. Then they just want to watch the last minute and a half, and if you're unreasonable about just yanking it away, I think now they've got certain things that you can download as apps that will track time, and it'll say, hey, you're only allowed half an hour, but then it'll start saying 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 4. So if they don't want to go to the next level, they shouldn't go to the next level. Or if they're doing something on social media, they can log off and tell their friends, can't play anymore, can't play anymore. Because a lot of these games, especially the social games, you're ripping your kid out of something where they have a responsibility to the other team members, right? So, and that could be like social suicide to them if they drop the ball on something that they're doing collaboratively. So I think we have to, put some context into what we're doing when we're asking them to log off. We got to make sure they wrap up what they're doing.
Right.
And yeah.
I don't want to go off topic, because I know we're talking about this one, but I know from being your co-host for 10 years, there were times that we talked about getting into a child's level. So when you're talking about electronics, if you don't understand the game or whatever it is that they're watching or playing, and you don't understand that it's with a team or then how are you to appreciate the extra minute, or you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, and I think I think if it's something that your kid is really into, that you should go check it out. And so a lot of times parents are, I actually really like that game. They're kind of surprised at what they liked. I would also say that even if you don't like it, be kind about that. And what I mean by that is, for some kids, this is like the most important thing to them, and they are really super proud of how they do it. It's like an area of competency in their lives. And their parents will be like, no, I don't care. Oh, that stupid computer. Oh, you're on there forever. Oh, that mind-numbing whatever. And so imagine if we use that against something like, say, hockey. Imagine if you had a parent that said, like, I'm not going to your games. That's a stupid waste of time. I'm going to your all you do is skate around with this puck and what. If you're a kid and that's your thing, that's so dismissive of you and your hobbies and what you like and what's important to you. So, you might not care about these things, but really watch the words that come out of your mouth. And if it's important to your child, then take care and concern for anything that might be of interest to them. Now, I can see not wanting to watch hours of YouTube videos of, cats running along keyboards or whatever is their latest passion. You can say, yeah, that's really interesting. I'd love to watch with you for a few minutes, but then I'm only good for about 5 on that one. Like, I could play Lego all day. I could only really do like the dress up for, that was the shorter thing for me.
Yeah.
But I embraced it when I was in it. Yeah.
All right. Let's switch it up and change the tables a little bit. This question is, I am the one with the anger issues. My kids run around acting silly and don't listen to anything I say. I am just one raw mama. There doesn't seem to be any joy left in me at all. It makes me sad.
Yeah. But you know what? It's not hard to get to that place. Because if you haven't got some of the basic discipline things happening, and you've got multiple kids, they're going to just take advantage, So what ends up happening is then we get drained. And when we get drained, we can't be effective. We don't use the tools. We get short. We get impatient. And because it starts to happen day after day, we start to anticipate it, which means then we come to every situation with our kids already inflamed. So imagine it's like you wake your kids up in the morning and you say, good morning, and they don't get out of bed, and you're like, here we go again. Every morning I gotta go up there. And so then instead of walking into the bedroom and saying, good morning, honey, what would you like for breakfast? We're like, really? And it's just, we don't realize it. We just start the whole day off. We invite our kids into some of the fights just by our attitude of expectation that it's going to be bad again.
Yes.
So I would say you need a holiday. I mean, just really, honestly, we need to like build in some recovery time for moms, right? And especially if you've got difficult kids. So who can that be? Can you get a babysitter? Can you get a friend? Can you get your partner? But you need to go away for 2 days, go hit the spa, go to Starbucks with a book, whatever this family can manage. But I would say a lot more recovery time. And then I would listen, listen to that voice inside your head. Anyone who's dealing with anger, what we say is it's not the situation that creates the anger. There's the trigger, the activating event, the kid who won't get out of bed. That's not the part that actually creates the anger. What creates the anger is the story we tell ourselves about how distasteful it is that the child won't get out of bed.
Right.
So I want to revisit that story. And can we take that story and change it in some way? And some of it might be, we talked about this in the other show, that some parents will see it as disrespect. Well, it could be disrespect, or it could be that's a child who's testing limits and boundaries, and that's their job. And if we suddenly say, oh, that's just a kid doing their job, then we might not get so angry about it. Or we might say, well, that's a kid not getting out of bed. It's kind of disrespectful, but how? Like, is this the worst thing? Like, is this the same as spitting in my face? Is this the same as, so maybe I could downgrade it and say, I didn't really want to have a tough morning, but it looks like I'm going to have one of those. And see if we can't dial it back from a 10 down to a... What an aggravation, as opposed to a catastrophe.
Well, it's flying off the handle versus, trying to assess the situation.
Yeah. So that's really, and that's why I love mindfulness meditation. When we can separate ourselves from our thoughts, we move out of reactivity. And then we suddenly open up this little window where we see a situation, we hear the talk, but we're not so invested in it, and now we have choice to respond instead of react. And we don't have to feel hijacked by our thinking. And we don't have to feel hijacked by those anger emotions that are biological that come up. We can say, oh, hey, I get you. That's Mr. Anger coming to visit. Thank you, Mr. Anger. I happen to know if I stay long in you, I'm going to have a morning that goes worse than if I take a deep breath and calm myself down. So I think we learn to manage our emotions, even as adults, through anger management classes, through mindfulness meditation, and try to open that window to settle down the reactivity and come up with some different choices. And parenting classes will teach you what are some more tools that I can have so that I don't resort just to using anger, which usually kids will get out of bed if we're angry enough.
Yes.
And then we start saying, oh, look, it worked. I'll do that more often.
Yeah, and so it really is just this escalation. You start right at the top.
Right, and then you have to be at the top for everything because it's the only thing that's going to work with the kids.
Yeah. Often the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
And so if you have two similar personalities and they're constantly butting heads, that can also cause issues and anger within the family as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because usually the kids that have the anger issues, that have like conduct issues, they'll tend to put those kids in the classrooms with like the most strict teacher because they think, oh, that teacher's going to get that kid in line. But the research shows, to your point, what you end up doing is you got a strong-willed kid and you got a strong-willed teacher, and they're actually more likely to butt horns in the classroom. So rather than going with the strict teacher, the firm teacher, what they find is that for those types of kids, they do better with the more Rogerian, actually after Rogerian is in the theorist, not Carl Rogers, not Mr. Rogers.
Right.
But they're both the same kind of people, to tell you the truth. That soft, gentle, compassionate person is probably more of a match. So think about that for yourself. If you've got a kid who's got anger issues, are you being your most gentle self, or can you channel your inner Mr. Rogers and stand in the face of anger? Some people get very triggered because of their own history. Some people are conflict avoidant. Some people were abused as kids. They've got their own history of what does it mean when people display big emotions. And that can either invite other people to display big emotions, or it can actually cause them to retreat, and then they're not a good disciplinarian because they're actually kind of frightened of their child. And we can't work from a place of fear if we're going to be a good disciplinarian.
Right.
So for some people it does mean going to counseling. Counseling for the child. It could be counseling for the adult, to unpack some of their history.
Right. And counseling isn't, I know that you've said this before, it shouldn't be reactive. Often counseling is proactive. So if you see, that something is starting, that's the time to really go in and talk to somebody.
Yeah, people often wait until the situation is dire because they think counseling is sort of a dirty word. It's for people that have big problems. But I like to compare it to if you have a car, you go in for the cabin filters, you change the oils, you put new snow tires on. I want to do regular maintenance on a family. I don't always want to be calling in when it's like a junker in a big car accident, and I'm here for roadside assist, but let's keep you tuned up. So the minute you start seeing things that you're not being effective with, it doesn't take long to change how a family is functioning if you get in there early. So don't think of it as being like, ooh, I don't want people to know we're going for family. Or the people say, oh, you're going for counseling? Your family's great. It's like, yeah, but how much better could we be? So don't wait. Come in. Things can change very quickly.
Or that's why we are great. That's why things work.
Yeah.
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 Because we have the tools in place.
Why not? Yeah. And, a lot of workplaces cover things under their insurance policies. And like I said, a couple of sessions, get things on the road. Let me look under the hood. Fix your oil.
Yes. For folks who want a little more information, they can head to your website.
Yes, lots of blog posts and videos on my website for sure. Yep.
The thing I love is that they can type in a subject and it automatically will produce some of the information that you have on your site about that.
And check my resource page too. I don't know if people find that tab. So if something comes my way that is for teachers or something about divorce or a book, a workshop, a link to another website, like Anxiety BC, I send people to that link all the time. They've got such a great website for anxiety. So go look on the resource page because it might not be in a blog post, but just scroll through and see what's there.
Right. We did see your books up on the screen.
Buy them, please.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What?
Or take them out of the library. Read them.
But they are available everywhere. 3 books. I love that you are a best-selling author.
Thank you.
And we started the parenting show when you were writing those books. So there was a lot of stressful weeks. Some weeks were stressful and deadline filled for you.
What a journey this has been, right? Yeah, really fun. This has been a super way to give back to the community. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we're making the world better one family at a time.
Well, I think you are absolutely making the world a better place to be. For anybody who wants to take a look at all of the episodes, we have a lot of different topics. The Parenting Show is available on YouTube on the Rogers TV channel, so make sure you head there and you can see all 16 episodes from this series of The Parenting Show, and rogerstv.com for more information on air times on the channel. For now, that's it for this edition of The Parenting Show. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.